So, we thought we'd do something a little special for the month of December and spend these last few episodes of the year recapping what's been happening in the true crime world in 2024. We will often get questions and requests like, oh, can y'all cover this big case? Or what do you think about this case that's in the news? And we typically don't cover those cases that you see in the news for a couple of reasons. One, we prefer and try to cover cases that are lesser known and haven't received that much attention. And two, we like to wait until trials have finished up so that we can have all the facts and we don't have to say allegedly to everything. But at the same time, we are a podcast of the people and we know y'all want to hear our thoughts about all the messed up stuff that's happened this year. So we're going to kick off this episode with talking about a few cases and stories that happened between January and April of 2024. Welcome to your True Crime Wrap.
Hi, I'm Dev.
And I'm Cam.
And you're listening to Criminalish, a true crime podcast where two best friends trade stories ranging from the wild and wacky to the downright messed up.
Let's get into the foolishness that was 2024. But before we get into all of the messed up things that happened this year, what you drinking, friend?
I am drinking a raspberry lemonade sparkling ice water out of a wine glass because I'm fancy. And I'm not drinking right now, so I'm trying to make myself feel like I am. What about you, friend?
Well, it is November, it's cold outside, and I feel like it's something going around. So I have some throat coat tea right here with me, and that is what I'm drinking tonight.
Respect it a lot. So I'm going to kick us off on today's episode, and I'm going to go over the top 3 things that I found the most interesting and wacky and crazy that happened in January of 2024. So our first story today took place on January 9th, 2024, when a Clark County judge set bail for Dwayne Keefe D. Douglas, the suspect in the 1996 killing of rap legend and one of the finest men to ever spit a rhyme, Tupac, at $750,000. In December of 2023, Keefe D's special public defenders made a motion to the judge to place Keefe D under house arrest and for his bail not to exceed $100,000. His defense attorneys claimed that he was not a threat to the community or a flight risk. According to the motion, the former Compton Crips gang leader's health was declining since his arrest in September after being indicted by a grand jury. His attorney said he is, quote, not getting his bi-monthly checkups and his diet in jail is terrible, end quote. Prosecutors argued that Keefe D remains, quote, part of the gang lifestyle, end quote, and still remains a threat to the community. They also cited multiple interviews where allegedly Keefe D identified himself as the one who ordered the hit on Tupac. And while I have to say this is alleged because it came from the prosecution, this is also something that was written in the book published by Keefe D called Compton Street Legend, Notorious Keefe D's street-level accounts of Tupac and Biggie murders, death row origins, Suge Knight, Puffy Combs, and Crooked Cops, published in 2019.
Since when are gangs writing books? Now I'm all for increasing the literacy rate, but I don't know if that's the right route.
I don't think it is either. And it definitely wasn't for Keefe D because this book is what led to his indictment, in my humble opinion. And while the judge did place Keefe D's bail over $100,000, because remember, he placed it at $750,000, Keefe D would be placed on house arrest if he was able to post bail. However, in August of 2024, Keefe D's bail would be rejected by the Clerk District Court judge after citing concerns about a possible cover-up regarding the legality of the funds being used for his bail. And this was in spite of the fact that Keefe D's attorneys attempted to provide additional documentation to the court to prove that the bail money was obtained legally. According to this documentation, Keefe D and the music record executive offering to underwrite his bail aren't planning to reap profits from the sales of Keefe D's life story, which was another concern that the judge had. However, according to the judge, she received 2 identical letters, allegedly from an entertainment company claiming that Cash Whack 100 Jones wired the funds for Keefe D's bail in exchange for his services. The judge noted that one of the letters was signed by a name unrelated to the entertainment company, and the other letter featured a misspelled name and a return address associated with the doctor's office. And as far as I know, Keefe D is continuing to be held pre-trial, which is scheduled to go forward at some point in 2025.
Now, small question. Is Cash Whack 100 Jones the government name?
You know, for reasons I can't quite put my finger on, I do not think that is his government name. I don't even think his mama called him that. If you know that reference.
The audacity. First, to potentially get caught because you wanted to publish a book, and then to talk about how you're not getting the right diet in jail. Jail isn't really known for the diversity of its food options.
Or its nutritional value.
Yeah.
But again, babes, this is the consequences of your actions. Nobody told you to write that book. It was self-published too. Nobody told you to do that.
Of course it was self-published. We will definitely be keeping track of the outcome of that trial when it happens next year.
Absolutely, because I need some justice for Tupac. Because again, he was such a smart, fine young man, and he did not deserve to leave this earth the way he did. So I'm gonna need some justice. I'm gonna need some justice for that.
Same.
So now on to our next story, which took place on January 29th, 2024. And that is the trial for the murder of Run DMC DJ Jason Mizell, also known as Jam Master Jay, began. On January 24th, 2024, Carl Jordan Jr. and Ronald Washington went to trial for the October 30th, 2002 murder of Jason Mizell, better known as Jam Master Jay. Both defendants were charged with murder while engaging in a narcotics trafficking conspiracy and firearm-related murder for the fatal shooting of Jason Mizell inside his recording studio in Hollis, Queens. According to the prosecution, between the 1990s and 2002, separate from his music career, Jason Mizell was involved in arranging for the sale of kilogram quantities of cocaine in the Eastern District of New York and elsewhere. In August 2002, Jason acquired approximately 10 kilograms of cocaine on consignment from a supplier based in California. The cocaine was intended to be distributed in Maryland by Ronald Washington, Carl Jordan Jr., and other co-conspirators. A dispute between Ronald and one of the co-conspirators in Baltimore resulted in Jason cutting Ronald and Carl out of the Maryland drug deal worth almost $200,000. Following this betrayal, Ronald and Carl continued in the larger narcotics conspiracy until they could ultimately cut out Jason Mizell by murdering him on October 30th, 2002. On Wednesday, October 30th, 2002, Jason was present at his recording studio 24/7, located on Merrick Boulevard in Jamaica, Queens, playing a video game with a friend and reviewing paperwork with his business manager. According to the prosecution, at approximately 7:30 p.m., Ronald and Carl's co-conspirator opened a locked fire escape exit door, allowing Ronald and Carl to enter the building without being seen by Jason. Carl, who was Jason's godson, and Ronald went upstairs to the recording studio, where Carl greeted Jason, who was sitting on the couch and initially appeared happy to see him. Things turned quickly, with Carl pointing a gun at Jason and firing 2 shots at close range. One shot hit Jason in the head, killing him instantly. The second shot struck Jason's friend in the leg. Jason's business manager tried to flee and was met by Ronald, who pointed a gun at her face and demanded that she lay on the floor. The 3 men then fled the scene. Ronald and Carl both made admissions to associates implicating themselves in the fatal shooting and bragged about being the shooter. For example, a witness who lived in the residence owned by Carl's father testified that he overheard Carl say that if Jason, quote, were still alive, he would kill him again, end quote. Ronald's former girlfriend also testified that several days after the murder, he admitted to killing Jason. Additionally, at the trial, Carl was identified as the shooter by the individual who was shot in the leg, and Jason's business manager identified Ronald as being present in the recording studio during the murder and pointing a firearm at her and ordering her to get on the floor. The co-conspirator who allowed Ronald and Carl to enter through the fire escape door will be tried separately for his role in Jason's murder in January of 2026. After 4 weeks of trial, on February 27, 2024, a federal jury in Brooklyn returned a guilty verdict against Carl Jordan Jr. and Ronald Washington. After the verdict was announced, U.S. State's Attorney for the East District of New York said, quote, more than 2 decades after they killed Jason Mizell in his recording studio, Jordan and Washington have finally been held accountable for their cold-blooded crime driven by greed and revenge. He continued by stating, quote, that the victim, professionally known as Jam Master Jay, was a hip-hop icon, and Run DMC's music was born in Hollis, Queens, in this very district, and beloved by so many, adds to the tragedy of a life seamlessly cut short. I thank the jurors for their service, and I commend our prosecutors and the NYPD detectives, both active and retired, and the special agents and investigators from the AFT and my office for their relentless pursuit of justice for the victim, his family, and the community, end quote. I was unable to find their exact sentence, but I do know that both men were facing a minimum of 25 years to a maximum of life in prison.
Killing your godfather is wild. I mean, I'm not sure what their relationship was actually like, but it seems like it was at least somewhat positive. Even if they couldn't be quote unquote business partners, it seems like, he was still excited to see him. And to take someone's life like that just for money and power and drugs is wild. But unfortunately, it wasn't the first time, and it's not going to be the last time that someone's going to lose their life over something so senseless. And then to brag about it.
Exactly. To brag about killing your godfather. And I think the thing I hate the most about this case, I did not follow this trial when it happened. Federal cases are not streamed or recorded anywhere. But I would just be very, very curious to know what the conversation was before you shot him in the head. Because by all accounts, he was happy to see you. And it seems like you just came in with a plan to murder him. It wasn't like something set you off. It wasn't like something happened. You just came knowing that you were going to kill your godfather. And that's crazy to me. And on to our final story for January, which took place also on January 29th, 2024. And that is a judge orders an evidentiary hearing in the case of Alex Murdaugh after his defense attorneys alleged that the clerk of court attempted to tamper with the jury. On January 29th, 2024, Alex Murdaugh, the former South Carolina attorney who was convicted in 2023 for the killing of his wife Maggie and his son Paul, sat before Judge Jean Toll requesting a new trial after his attorneys found evidence that the clerk of court, Rebecca Becky Hill, tampered with the jury in order to obtain a guilty verdict. In the defense's motion for a new trial, Murdaugh and his attorneys alleged Becky misrepresented information to the trial judge about a juror who was ultimately dismissed. According to Murdaugh's defense team, Becky's alleged tampering was meant to, quote, secure for herself a book deal and media appearances that would not happen in the event of a mistrial, end quote. They continued by stating, quote, Miss Hill betrayed her oath of office for money and fame, end quote, and cited at least 3 sworn affidavits, including one from an active juror and another juror that was dismissed, as well as excerpts from Becky's book, Behind the Doors of Justice, The Murdaugh Murders. During the hearing, the first juror question, identified as Juror Z, testified that she was influenced by remarks Becky made, telling the judge she heard the clerk say to, quote, watch his actions, end quote, and to, quote, watch him closely, end quote. Becky's comments, Juror Z said, quote, made it seem like he was already guilty. end quote. When asked if Becky's comments affected her findings of guilt, the juror said, quote, yes, ma'am, end quote. Juror Z was also asked about an affidavit where she indicated that she had questions about Murdaugh's guilt, but voted for a guilty verdict, quote, because I felt pressured by the other jurors, end quote. When asked by the judge if it was, quote, a more accurate statement of how you felt, end quote, the juror said, quote, yes, ma'am, end quote, affirming she stood by the affidavit. The affidavit also said prior to Alex Murdaugh testifying, Becky told the jurors, quote, not to be fooled, end quote, by evidence offered by the defense. The juror wrote she took it as an indication that Alec would lie. However, shortly after this testimony, the hearing was briefly interrupted by the revelation that jurors' phones had been confiscated and some jurors had watched Juror Z's testimony while waiting to testify. And while 2 jurors acknowledged during their questioning that they watched part of the hearing on their cell phones prior to testifying, and a 3rd juror acknowledged overhearing the proceedings on another juror's phone, each said it would not impact their testimony that day. Which I'm just like, we're here because we believe that you guys were tampered with and you're listening to the hearing? What are you doing?
Did y'all not learn?
Right. Despite all this, all other remaining jurors denied being influenced, though 2 did say they heard similar comments come from Becky when Alec took the stand to testify. A different juror, identified as Juror X, who testified the day before this hearing due to a scheduling conflict, described hearing Becky say the day was, quote, important and epic, end quote, because of Alec's testimony. Another juror, Juror P, testified about hearing Becky make a comment about watching Alec's body language. But both jurors said that these comments did not influence their decision to convict. In addition to the signed affidavit provided by Becky Hill denying all 26 specific allegations from Alec's motion for a new trial, she also took the stand during this trial. Under questioning by the prosecution, Becky stated that she referred to the day of Alec's testimony as a, quote, big day, end quote, and said to, quote, pay attention, end quote. But she likened her comments to a, quote, pep talk, end quote, which was not meant to indicate favor for one side or another. And she denied telling the jurors to watch Alec's actions or body language. For context though, she shouldn't even be talking to the jurors at all. Like, the fact that you're even telling them this is a big day and that they should pay attention is a bad look, because it's making it seem like the information today is more important than any other day in the trial. You shouldn't be doing that. Under cross-examination, Becky Hill stated that the morning before final arguments, she told someone that if they wanted to come and see the trial, they should come that day because it was not going to take the jurors long to deliberate. And when the defense asked, how could you possibly know how long it's going to take the jurors to deliberate, Becky stated that she did not derive this information from the jurors and instead called it a, quote, gut feeling, end quote, stemming from her years of working as a court reporter and a clerk of court. Her book also came under fire during cross-examination, but Becky simply stated that she had a, quote, fleeting thought, end quote, before the trial that she might write a book, but she didn't take any steps towards doing so before or during the trial. According to her, she and her co-author did not begin collaborating until several weeks after the trial's conclusion. So, based on all of this information, it's time for Justice Toll to make her ruling in this case. And her ruling was that she was not convinced the clerk of court, Becky Hill, was a completely credible witness and believes that she had been afflicted by, quote, the siren call, end quote, to be a celebrity and write a book about the trial. However, she concluded her ruling by saying, quote, I simply do not believe that the authority of our South Carolina Supreme Court requires a new trial and a very lengthy trial such as this on the strength of some fleeting and foolish comments by a publicly influenced clerk of court, end quote. She also then formally denied Alec's motion for a new trial, and he is currently sitting in jail, filing appeal after appeal with hopes of one day being exonerated for the murder of Maggie and Paul.
Yeah, because they were really reaching with that one. Like, I do think what she did was towing the line of jury tampering, but I don't think it warranted a whole new trial.
I mean, honestly, I actually followed the entire Murdaugh case because I thought it was fascinating. But I didn't read it, but I had it read to me, the defense's motion. And I'm going to be honest with you, Cam. The stuff that she did toed the line for me to where I was like, I actually do feel like he needs a new trial. I just did not think it was appropriate for her to be saying the things that she was allegedly saying to the jury. Again, your job as a clerk of court is to be like, do you need water? What time do you guys want to eat lunch? Blah, 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 blah. You shouldn't be telling people to pay attention. You shouldn't be telling people that today is a big day. And one of the things that the defense alleges is that she tells the jury right before they go back to deliberate that this shouldn't take long. That's completely inappropriate.
Yeah, you're right. I let my dislike of him and my belief in his guilt get in the way of that. I am thinking back to the one juror saying that all the things she was saying did have an impact on the decision that she made.
Right. And the judge did ask, like, but you submitted this affidavit that says something different. So which statement do you stand by? And she stood by the affidavit statement, which is why the judge was like, okay, cool. This is all cleared up now. Because jurors are allowed to pressure jurors to vote one way or the other. They are allowed to do that. But the clerk of court certainly is not. And I think, too, please don't let anybody get it twisted here. I think Alec Murdaugh is guilty as sin. I think he is going to spend an eternity in hell, not only for what he did to Maggie and Paul, but also for the money he stole from injured people, from children of dead parents. He's going to spend an eternity in hell for that. And I hope he does. But at the same time, I look at it from the perspective of what happens if that's you and you don't have the $1 million defense team. What if all you have is your public defender who is advocating for you, who is doing their best for you, but they don't have the bandwidth to fight the entire South Carolina bar for you? They don't have the bandwidth to do that. So what happens if it's you?
Yep.
And that concludes all our crazy cases for January, friend.
And I'm going to kick us off with a couple stories that came out in February of this year. And as usual, y'all were on one. And the first story I have is Mason Herring being sentenced to 180 days in jail for poisoning his wife with abortion medication. So the sentencing took place on February 7th, 2024 in Harris County, Texas. So let's get into what happened here. So beginning in March of 2022, Mason Herring, who's a lawyer, tried to poison his wife with the abortion pill misoprostol. Now, he actually tried to poison her 7 times throughout 2022. His wife, whose name is Catherine Herring, ended up having her baby prematurely, but her daughter now has developmental delays. Catherine and Mason had already been married for 11 years and had 2 kids before this even happened. So why did Mason do this? Well, at the time that Mason found out about the pregnancy, they were actually in marriage counseling. But Mason was not happy with this news because I guess he already had a little thing he was trying to get at his law office. And he literally told his wife, like, you're going to make me look like a jerk. Sir, you stuck your in me. It takes 2 to tango. But anyways, yeah, so that's why Mason was mad. And fortunately, even though he tried to do this 7 times, Catherine actually only ingested it once. And this happened when he was basically telling her, oh, you need to hydrate since you're pregnant. And he dropped the pill in the water that he gave her and it made her sick. So after that, she put cameras in the house and basically saw him putting the pill in the water and would basically throw out any drink that he gave her. So Mason ended up accepting a plea agreement on charges of injury to a child and assault of a pregnant person. In addition to the 180 days in jail that he was sentenced to, a judge ordered him to 10 years of probation and barred him from having contact with his estranged wife and 1-year-old daughter. And the last thing I'll say is this man really had the nerve to file a sentence reduction request.
You barely got a sentence.
Exactly. And I think the other frustrating thing about this too is that there are women who are facing more time in jail for the accidental deaths of the babies that they were carrying than he is.
Yep. Even though he poisoned a woman.
He literally poisoned her. But where is the pro-life movement for that? Crickets.
It's not convenient for the pro-life movement. It's the same pro-life movement that isn't going to also support her as she tries to raise a child with developmental delays.
Right.
Yeah, I remember this case and it just pissed me off so bad because I always felt like he was never going to get any real consequences for doing this to this woman. Because here's a real situation. If you don't want to be with me, if you don't want our baby, leave. Leave and go try your luck with your little thing at the office who probably doesn't even want you because she sees through your nonsense anyway because she's smart. Go do that. Don't poison me. Don't attempt to kill my child. Let me live my life and I will raise this baby without you. Move on.
Because miscarriages are really hard to go through. Even abortions, when you want to get an abortion, even that process is really hard to go through. So to try and force someone to go through that is wild. And then also for your daughter, hopefully she doesn't find out about this, but if she does, she's going to know that her father tried to kill her before she was even born.
Exactly. And like, it's so devastating on every front because some women have described miscarrying as the worst day of their life. They have trauma for years and years and years afterwards. And to intentionally force that on somebody you made a vow to, you hate her guts. You hate her on a level that is scary, that is concerning. And I would be terrified of what you could possibly be capable of if you're willing to poison her and force her into such a tragic, awful mental state. What else are you capable of?
Exactly. Now on to the other thing that we're going to cover for February, which is when Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt were sentenced to up to 30 years for child abuse charges. So this sentencing took place on February 20th, 2024 in Washington County, Utah. Now, there's a lot of information for this case, much of which we're not going to cover today. However, we will link to a deep dive on this case if you were interested. But to do just a broad overview, Ruby Franke is a former YouTuber famous for her parenting content. And this case actually began when one of Ruby's 6 children escaped the house and ran to a neighbor's house asking for help. Now, Jodi Hildebrandt, the other person in this case, had a counseling business, which Ruby's family say she used to brainwash Ruby into believing that what they were doing to Ruby's children was to save their souls. Considering they were abusing these children, I don't get what they were saving their souls from, but you know what? That's just me. So in the end, Ruby pleaded guilty to 4 counts of child abuse in December of 2023 and admitted to torturing her children and also agreed to testify against Jodi, who ended up pleading guilty just 4 days after that. Ruby and Jodi were sentenced to 4 consecutive prison terms, ranging from 1 to 15 years for each term. This case was so messed up, and Dev, I know you know a lot more about it. One thing that stood out to me was the prosecutor in the case comparing the children's living environment to a concentration camp. Like, that is wild.
Absolutely, it is wild. And Cam is right. I followed this case from start to finish. I have been very anti-family vlogging channels for a very long time, but it really started with the Franke family because Ruby Franke specifically has been showing her abusive tendency towards her children for a very long time. There's a very infamous video of her saying because her 3-year-old did not pack their own lunch that they didn't get to eat that day, and telling her teachers not to let her eat that day because the child was irresponsible. This is a 3-year-old, maybe 4. I could be messing up the age. Definitely not old enough to remember to pack their own lunch. And she did this all the time. She withheld food from her children if they didn't act the way that she wanted them to, and recorded this, posted it on YouTube, deleted all the evidence afterwards, but she did it. And the thing I hated about this case so much is while the videos of the children are blurred, you can hear what they're saying when the police show up to come and pick them up. One of the officers actually had to leave the scene because she was so devastated after seeing the conditions that the children were in. And she couldn't hold it together. And I couldn't either. And these children genuinely believed that all of this was their fault, that what their mother was doing to them was love, and that they were just bad and evil and they deserved it. That's the kind of parent Ruby was. And she could do all this talk about, oh, being brainwashed and Jodi took advantage of me, blah, blah, blah. Nobody can take advantage of you or if you are not already in a position to be willing to do that to your children. You were already abusing your children. She just took it one step further, then one step further, and then one step further. And you walked alongside her. I hate that people try to act like Ruby's a victim in this, that she was a victim of Jodi. Jodi is crazy in her own right. She's got a lot of stuff to go work out, but Ruby is not as innocent as she likes to play that she is. And I hope that both of them serve their full term, that both of them are in there together, locked away together, because Ruby does not deserve any sympathy. Because again, you've been abusing those children for years. You just finally got caught.
Yeah. And I think what's also so sad about it is there are parents and families with so little who still try and go above and beyond to give their children what they can. And Ruby had so much and gave her children so little.
Exactly. Her children were props. Her children were actors in her little movies. They were nothing more. And Ruby's oldest daughter, who is estranged and basically ran from the house, wrote a book recently on what she went through growing up with Ruby and Kevin as well, because I still feel like Kevin is Ruby's husband. I still like he's not as innocent in this as everybody likes to think he is as well. Because again, how do you let one person abuse your children? Sorry. Nobody's starving my children. And I have not read this book. I have heard good things about it. I have heard very sad things about it. But I think this case is going to set a very, very important precedent to families who choose to vlog, families who choose to put your children who cannot consent online and choose to make money off of your children. It sets a tone for what is appropriate to what people are willing to do. And in other states, there are already laws that require parents to protect their children, to report things, to make sure that there are bank accounts set up in the children's names that the parents cannot touch. All the things that Hollywood has been requiring for children is now being demanded of these YouTubers and these family vlogs because it's so necessary.
Right.
And I hope the children are healing. And I hope all of Ruby's children are okay. I hope they're thriving. I hope they're doing better. And I hope that they continue to grow in a space where they are loved and cared for and don't ever have to put up with the kind of nonsense and abuse that they went through their lives.
Exactly. Wishing nothing but love and peace to the Frankie children. And that wraps up our cases for February. If there were other wild things that you know about that happened in February of this year, go ahead, put it in the comments and let us know.
So now it's time to move on to March 2024. And, I think March is most associated with March Madness, right? Everybody loves college basketball. Well, I got a story about basketball that I don't think everybody's going to like, because on March 8th, 2024, former NBA G League player and his ex-girlfriend are charged in a gruesome murder plot. So on March 8th, 2024, a Clark County grand jury returned a murder indictment against 27-year-old Chance Comanche and his ex-girlfriend, Sakari Hardin. According to the prosecution, they conspired and ultimately murdered a woman before dumping her body in the desert near Henderson, Nevada. The prosecution alleged that the plot to murder Morena Rogers, a friend of Sakari, was hatched by the couple in early December. According to text messages, the couple discussed strangling Morena. Chance told his ex-girlfriend in a text, quote, "I can snap her neck or just strangle the bitch," end quote. In another text message, he wrote, quote, "If you get a nice little thick piece of rope or some sturdy, I can do it from the back seat, like how killers do it in the movie," end quote. In an arrest warrant filed in Clark County District Court, police say that the pair lured Morena to a scheduled location under the guise of a prostitution deal. The pair strangled Morena in Sakari's vehicle before dumping her body in a ditch and covering her body with rocks, according to court documents. At the time of the murder, Chance was in Las Vegas for a basketball game, and he was playing in the NBA G League with the Scottsdale Kings. Prosecutors say on March 8th, the couple and the victim were caught on surveillance camera at a liquor store before the trio drove to a residential area, where Chance alleges that the murder was committed when they were parked in a cul-de-sac near Horizon Ridge Parkway and Gibson Road in Henderson, Nevada. And according to the arrest report, Chance strangled Morena with a cord while Sakari joined in and began choking her with her hands, and they would later bury her in a shallow grave. Court records indicated that Chance later admitted to his role in the murder and led investigators to Morena's body in the desert. Detectives identified a possible motive, stating that Sakari allegedly implicated a man identified as her boyfriend in a double murder in California, and as a result, the boyfriend went into custody. According to the arrest report, Quote, Sakari was upset that Morena was telling other people that Sakari had implicated her boyfriend in the murder. End quote. The couple was arrested and charged with murder, kidnapping, and 2 counts of conspiracy. Both of them are being held without bail, and both would plead not guilty to the charges against them.
This unfortunately sounds like the plot of a Tubi movie, and that's not to downplay the seriousness of it, but it's just so ridiculous. Like, you really thought you could get away with this. You took someone's life for nothing.
For nothing. You took her life over petty beef? Instead of being like, hey girl, I heard you was talking. We kill women now? We kill our friends now for this?
Yeah. And this is not to say if you think you can get away with it, you should commit murder, because you should never commit murder, because y'all clearly don't even have the sense you were born with. I'm just saying, it's 2024. I need people to learn. Do not text about the crimes you are going to commit.
Come on now.
It will be put into evidence. Even if you delete it from your phone, it is not deleted forever.
Come on now.
And also to do this to your friend.
Right. And again, if the whole thing is y'all were beefing because allegedly she said you weren't a down girlfriend, you snitched, right? She had a problem with that. Cut her off. Block her. Look, talk crap about her on social media. I'll take all of that. You don't kill her over that. And then throw your life away. And then especially, I'm sorry, but Chance, what do you have to do with this at all?
Literally.
Which also, I didn't include this in here, but I have a separate issue with Chance because his ex-girlfriend is 19. But I'm going to have to put that in the pin over there for now. But I got other issues with him as well. But what do you have to do with this? Why are you throwing away your entire life, your career, everything to murder a woman who did nothing to you? What was the point?
Yeah, just messy, just senseless. Like you said, he literally threw away his entire career.
Right, for nothing. So our next story for March is going to come with a brief trigger warning for mentions of self-harm. But our second story is on March 19th, 2024, Carly Gregg shot and killed her mother and attempted to kill her stepfather. So on March 19th, 2024, Carly Gregg shot and killed her mother, Ashley Smiley, and attempted to kill her stepfather, Heath Smiley, after they discovered that the 14-year-old was living a secret life. According to the prosecution, Carly Gregg was maintaining a secret life from her parents where she was using drugs, had multiple burner phones, was cheating in school, and was engaged in self-harm. And her parents were told this information by one of her friends who was worried about the things that Carly was doing. So, on March 19th, after Carly and her mother returned home from school that day, as Ashley was a math teacher at Carly's school, Ashley searched Carly's room and discovered vape pens, which would later be tested and revealed to contain marijuana. And just moments later, camera footage from inside the house shows Carly walking into the kitchen while hiding something behind her back before walking into the back bedroom where the sound of 3 gunshots and her mother's screaming could be heard. Carly then lured her stepfather home by texting him, pretending to be her mother, writing, quote, "When will you be home, honey?" End quote. She also texted one of her friends to come over to the house, claiming that there was an emergency. Once the friend arrived, Carly allegedly asked her, quote, if she had ever seen a dead body before, end quote, before leading her to her mother's body and saying that her stepfather was next. Nearly an hour later, when her stepfather arrived at the house, Carly shot at him multiple times, but only landed 1 shot in his shoulder before the two began struggling over the gun. Video from the garage shows Carly running away after she allegedly shot her stepfather. Authorities were called, and when they arrived on scene, Heath can be heard screaming at officers, quote, "She killed her mom. She tried to shoot me," end quote. She was arrested a short time later and charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence. At her trial, Carly's defense team argued that she was experiencing significant mental health issues and that while she was having a, quote, state of psychosis in an episode of acute stress on March 19th, she lost herself in what was the perfect storm, end quote. However, on Friday, September 20th, after 2 hours of deliberation, the jury would return and find Carly Gregg guilty of all 3 counts against her. And after just another hour of deliberation, the jury would sentence 15-year-old Carly Gregg to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
This was a wild case.
Absolutely.
And I feel like it's just getting more and more common that we're hearing of children murdering their own parents, which is really scary to think about. And for this to pretty much have been caught on camera too, that was also a really wild part of this.
Absolutely. I remember when this case first dropped and being devastated that this was the extreme measure that she took. And I'm not even going to lie to you. At first, I initially thought that, oh, maybe there's some kind of abuse happening in the household. Like maybe she was defending herself, something like that. I really gave Carly the benefit of the doubt without knowing anything about the case. But the more I dived into it, it really does seem like Carly is suffering from some very deep psychological issues, but in my humble opinion, not enough to exonerate her from what she did. And it is incredibly sad. And I just feel so bad for Heath because he found his wife after Carly killed her. There is body cam footage of him screaming at the police after he has found his wife. And few things break my heart more than people screaming in distress on body cam footage. Something about that combination of events specifically is extra heartbreaking. And to cover our final case for the month of March, on March 25th, 2024, federal agents raid the homes tied to Sean Diddy Combs in Los Angeles and Miami. On March 25th, 2024, Homeland Security investigators carried out the raids on Sean Diddy Combs' Los Angeles and Miami homes, but they did not provide details about the case, including whether Diddy was a target or which criminal charges were being investigated. However, Diddy had been accused of sexual assault and sex trafficking in multiple civil lawsuits over the last several months. A criminal inquiry was being conducted by federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York and federal agents with Homeland Security. In a statement, Homeland Security said that agents from New York had, quote, executed law enforcement action as part of an ongoing investigation with assistance from HSI Los Angeles, HSI Miami, and our local law enforcement partners, end quote. Basically saying, yes, that was us. We did go raid that man's house. Video from Fox 11 KTTV, a local television station in Los Angeles, showed armed officers entering a home in the Homely Hills area of the city, which a law enforcement officer said was connected to Diddy. Public records in California also indicated that the home is owned by a company led by Diddy. Federal investigators in New York have been leading the investigation and have been conducting interviews asking potential witnesses about sexual misconduct allegations against Diddy for several months, according to a person very familiar with this case. Diddy, of course, has denied all the accusations against him. However, on September 18th, 2024, federal agents arrested Diddy and charged him with racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. And as a result, Diddy continues to sit in jail to this day, despite his defense attorney's best efforts to get him out on bail.
I know y'all wanted us to talk about this case, and talk we will, because both me and Dev have been keeping up with this, trying to see what's happening, what's coming out, what's being verified, and all of that. And before we get into some more of the specifics about the case, I will say one of the most disappointing things about the public discourse on this case was the phrase "no Diddy," referring to the possible sexual encounters he had with other men, and not the fact that he sexually assaulted, physically assaulted, verbally assaulted other women. Like, if you're saying "no Diddy," you should say, yeah, I'm not an evil person who assaults other women, not I'm not gay.
Yeah, Cam, you're right. It's always interesting the parts that people choose to, make a big fuss about. Because you know what the last thing I care about in relation to this case is Diddy's sexual preferences. I could not give less than a damn about who this man likes to sleep with. I care about the illegal things he did to the people he brought in. Because we're also, even in that vein, not talking about the fact that he also abused these men in addition to abusing these women and children. Let's keep our priorities straight here. Let's please keep our priorities straight here.
Exactly.
Because trust me, nobody wants to see Diddy rot in hell more than I do. Because as I stated earlier, I think Diddy is an evil, evil man. Diddy's been a supervillain since the 90s. This is not new information. It's just finally caught up with him. And I don't know how, because he didn't even write a book. How this is finally all caught up with him, I really don't know. But I'm glad it did. But it really pisses me off how often everybody who sits at the top of the table is evil. If we think about the Harvey Weinsteins of the world, the Diddys of the world, even the R. Kellys of the world, y'all are evil. Evil people who literally built their success and their lives off the back of abuse, of trafficking, of evil behavior. And y'all want to make jokes about whether or not something is gay?
Exactly.
Priorities, where are they? I need you to find them quickly.
I need you to find the priorities, and I'm sure the priorities are right next to your empathy. So I'm going to need you to go ahead, pick both of those up, please.
Come on now.
And the last thing I want to say too is I also remember when the video of Cassie being dragged in the hotel came out, that was jarring too. And I haven't even seen the video. I've just seen screen grabs from it because I cannot bring myself to watch a woman actually being assaulted. But just reading the description of it and knowing that this video existed, he did this in broad daylight and he essentially paid off the hotel security to delete the video. Fortunately, someone did not delete it, but knowing that that video went unreleased for so long, simply because he had the money to pay someone in security not to release it, it just shows you how he was able to do this for decades because he had people enabling him. He wasn't doing this alone. Even if people weren't committing the actual assault, there were so many people who were complicit in this, who were not victims of what Diddy was doing.
Absolutely. And those people are also testifying against him now. Because there's people coming all out of the woodwork and being like, yeah, I saw him smack Cassie across the face. I saw him smack other women across the face. I've seen him do this. I've seen him punch dudes in the face for no reason. Multiple people are coming out with this, confirming basically everything that Cassie wrote in her lawsuit. And this might be a little bit of a problematic opinion. I'm okay. I will wear this problematic flag proudly. If there was no backing to what she said, you wouldn't have settled that case in one day. If you weren't guilty of everything she said, you wouldn't have settled that case in one day.
Are there people who say that he settled for another reason?
Absolutely.
Are there people with sense who say that he settled for another reason?
Absolutely not. That's the question, Cam. That's the better one. Yeah, there are people who basically tried to say that if he went through with the lawsuit, he would have to reveal like his trade secrets of the industry. And he wasn't willing to release his secrets of the industry. And that's why he settled. Which personally, you came out with all this rah-rah that you didn't do anything. If your version of events is that Cassie's a liar, drag her through the mud. Bring out everything. If she's a liar, we'll figure it out in court. But you didn't do that because you knew it was going to come back and bite you. You knew. And it's okay. But you should have just sat your butt at home. You should have just stuck in your basement making music instead of making women and men's lives hell. That's what you should have did. Sorry, women, men, and children. And that wraps up my top 3 crazy cases that happened in March. If you have any additional cases, be sure to leave them in the comments.
And now we're on to the last month of the first trimester of 2024, April. So to kick April off, we're going to be talking about the day that Chad Daybell's trial began, which was April 1st, 2024 in Ada County, Idaho. So this is another case where there's a whole bunch of information, especially about Lori Vallow, that we're not going to get into the details today. But if you all are interested, maybe we'll do a special deep dive on Patreon. Maybe. So just to give an overview, Chad Daybell was on trial for the murder of 2 of his second wife's children, 16-year-old Tylee and 7-year-old JJ, as well as the murder of his first wife, Tammy Daybell. Officials believe that Tylee and JJ were killed in September of 2019, which is when they were last seen. Tammy Daybell was found dead at her home in October 2019, just a few weeks before Chad and Lori got married. Now, let me clarify. Chad was still married to Tammy when she died. They've been married for 29 years and had 5 children. Lori Vallow was just his mistress. So in terms of Tammy's death, investigators initially believed that she died in her sleep, but would later realize that that was not the case. In terms of Tylee and JJ, police would end up finding their remains on Chad's property in June of 2020. At the end of his trial, Chad was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy charges and sentenced to death. Lori Vallow was convicted of the murder of her 2 children and sentenced to life in prison without parole in July of 2023. However, she's actually in court again for the murder of her ex-husband and the attempted murder of an in-law. As of this recording, she is going through a competency hearing to see if she is competent enough to stand trial. Now, Chad's defense lawyer pretty much tried to blame everything on Lori and basically called her a bomb that had dropped on his life and changed him from a man of faith. He was just a good church boy before this, until Lori Vallow, the seductress, came along. But I do just want to say a couple things about Tylee and JJ. So Tylee was described as a, quote, vibrant teenage girl, end quote, who had a wonderful singing voice and loved her mom, her friends, and her little brother. JJ, who was just 7 at the time of his death, was on the autism spectrum and needed special care, much more than his mother gave him.
Yeah, friend, you hit another case that I followed quite intensely, but I actually didn't care much for the Chad side of things. I have, maybe you call it a fascination, maybe you call it a frustration with women who do terrible things to their children. Something about mothers turning on their children grinds my gears in a way that is unmatched. So I was deep in the Lori Vallow of it all of her crazy speeches, all of her testimonials, whatever you want to call them, her thinking she's preaching to somebody, don't know who, not even the choir. It was very interesting to me. But I think what's so funny is Lori's attorneys tried to say the same thing about Chad, that Lori was a good Christian woman until Chad came in and started introducing all this crazy stuff to her, which, fun fact, if you want to be really tricked out about these cases, Chad Daybell and Jody Hildebrandt have the same belief system. And what's so funny about, like, Chad is allegedly this good Christian man, but he's the one sending text messages to Lori about how he's looking at people's death times, but he's claiming he has the ability to see whether or not people are evil. And he's telling Lori that, oh, this person's darkness level is rising and I can tell, and I've cut their spirit with my light sword. And yes, these are real text messages that he sent to this woman. I will include them on screen right now for our YouTube listeners. For our Spotify listeners, check the description for a YouTube video by a content creator that I actually edit for. I actually edited this video that I'm going to leave for y'all to reference. And you can go listen to the text messages that Chad Daybell sent to Lori Vallow Daybell, and you tell me who sounds crazy.
And I just think with this whole case, these children did nothing, and they were also so vulnerable. And that's why I think cases with children are very hard to deal with and to tell, because there are so few options when a child is in an abusive environment. There are so few options for that child to take, especially when they're really young. And like you said, for her to have taken her children's lives and ran off and married this man after she and him killed his other wife. And also knowing that Tylee loved her mom despite who she probably knew her mom was, it just really hurts.
Absolutely. Because children look up to their parents like they're everything. And I think this is also why cases like this hurt me so much too. Specifically when mothers kill their children, because you brought them into this world. You carried them for however long you had to to get them here. You went through hours of pain and suffering to bring this life into the world, and you cannot care about it enough to take care of it when they did nothing to you but ask for love and affection. But look at you like you are the sun, the moon, the stars, and the oxygen. That's how kids look at parents. And you betray them like that, especially in this case, because not only did you betray them by taking their lives, you took their father's life as well. It's going back to that same thing. You hated these children. You treated these children like you hated them, and they did nothing to you to deserve that. And even her sisters said to her, if you didn't want them, we would have taken them. We would have loved them. You didn't have to do this.
So on to our next case from April, which is when Hannah Gutierrez Reed was sentenced to 18 months in jail for the fatal shooting on the Rust movie set. So this sentencing took place on April 15th, 2024 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And for those who don't know, this is all related to the October 2021 death of Helena Hutchins, who was shot by Alec Baldwin while rehearsing a scene for the Rust movie. Joel Souza, a director, was also wounded when the gun went off. Prosecutors in this case said that Hannah brought live ammo to the movie set, even though it wasn't allowed, and said she failed to adhere to, quote, basic gun safety protocols, end quote. Hannah, in her defense, claimed that she was doing her best with limited time, resources, and staff. Helena Hutchins was 42 at the time of her death and had grown up in Russia. She'd been making documentaries in Eastern Europe before she moved to LA to pursue cinematography. She was described as, quote, courageous, tenacious, and compassionate, end quote. As part of a settlement agreement between Helena's husband, Matthew, and the Rust production, filming would continue in Montana and Matthew would be made executive producer. Now, on to Alec Baldwin's trial. He was facing charges of involuntary manslaughter before his case was dismissed in July of this year due to the prosecution withholding evidence. Now, even though Hannah's lawyers filed a motion to dismiss her conviction and hold a new trial after Alec Baldwin's trial was dismissed, a judge upheld her conviction at the end of September. And in early October, she'd also pleaded guilty to bringing a gun into a downtown Santa Fe bar in 2021, shortly before the shooting of Helena took place. Now, this was a case that was all up in the news, of course, because of Alec Baldwin being involved. And I can only imagine what that environment was like, because you have actors and people who work on movie sets who were used to shooting these dangerous scenes with stunts and acting out these things that are meant to be deadly. And to realize that somebody has actually died, I can't imagine what that was like for everybody who was on set.
Absolutely. It was crazy. Joel Souza survived and was injured, but luckily did not have any long-term physical injuries as a result of the shooting. He testified in Hannah's trial, and he said that when the doctors told him that they just pulled a live bullet out of his shoulder, he was like, that's not possible. He said that he kept saying to the doctors, no, you don't understand. This is a movie set. That's not possible. That's a live bullet that you just pulled out of my shoulder. He was in such disbelief that this could even happen at all. It was actually really sad to watch him testify and kind of walk through how he came to grips with what happened, because not only was it a crazy environment, but the church was so small. Everybody was in such close proximity to each other because the bullet went through Helena and into Joel. That's how close everybody was standing to each other when it happened. And yes, it's just an incredibly sad case because not only was Helena married, she was a mother. She also had a child at the time who I believe was 9, maybe 10 years old. And now they have to grow up without a mother. Her husband has to raise a child without a mother or a wife for the time being anyways, unless he chooses to seek love again. One of the saddest things about the trial too was the victim impact statements of her family. And one of the things her mother said that really stuck out to me was nobody has apologized for what has happened to Helena. Nobody has said that they were sorry. Nobody had contacted her to tell her that they were sorry. And this is one of the things that inevitably pissed me off about Hannah making a statement to the court, because it was all about her. And it takes no skin off of your back to say, I am sorry for what happened. That doesn't implicate you. That doesn't make you guilty. You already been convicted at that point. It takes nothing out of you to just say to Helena's family, I am sorry that I didn't do my job, that I wasn't better. I am sorry.
Yeah, because you're supposed to be the expert here, because you were the armorer and are supposedly an expert on what you should and should not be doing with ammunitions on set. And clearly, as an armorer, you were not holding yourself up to these standards, both professionally or personally, since you decided to bring a gun into a licensed establishment and bragged about how you snuck it past security.
Exactly. I think that was another thing that pissed me off about this whole case is like Hannah tried to act like she was just this like really immature girl. Like she had this weird aesthetic to me that did not match up with the seriousness of this case. A woman is dead. A husband lost a wife. A child lost a mother. Take this more seriously.
Right.
How can you be that selfish? I don't care how old you were. So yeah, that's one of the many things that pissed me off about this case, because I too followed this case from the day it happened. I watched both of these trials. I watched the entire thing. I sat at work watching court with Emily D. Baker when Alec Baldwin's case got dismissed based on prosecution misconduct. And the saddest part about this is the prosecution to this day is still trying to argue with the judge that they didn't actually withhold evidence. She has wrote appeal after appeal after appeal until the judge has finally shut her down and told her, no, you fucked up. Deal with the consequences of your actions. Don't be mad that you can't prosecute this man anymore because you didn't do your job.
Exactly. So now we'll go on to our final case that we'll cover for this episode, which is when William Brock pleads not guilty to the murder of Lolita Hallow. So he made this plea on April 17th, 2024 in Clark County, Ohio. Now, if you're like, who is William Brock? Who is Lolita Hallow? The names might not sound familiar to you, but this case probably will. William Brock was an 81-year-old man who shot Lolita Hallow several times outside of his house in late March. He'd received calls from a scammer saying that one of his relatives was in jail, and they were trying to get money from him by threatening this relative and other members of his family. Lolita, who was an Uber driver, pulled up to William's house a little bit after. She'd also been a victim of this same scammer who'd hired her to pick up a package through the Uber app. One of the most infamous parts of this case was that there was a dash cam video that clearly showed William threatening Lolita, not allowing her to leave, and eventually shooting her. Shortly after this, William was arrested and charged with murder because there was no evidence that Lolita posed a threat to him, and he'd also made no calls to police for help while this was going on. He only called police after he shot her. Lolita would die of her injuries after being taken to the hospital. At the time of this recording, William's trial is set for March 2025, and he is currently out on bail. Regarding the scammers, Uber banned the account of the person who'd ordered the pickup, and police believe that person was either the scammer or an accomplice. Officers apparently talked to the scammer on the phone when these scammers tried to call William just after police arrived. At first, the scammer tried to impersonate an officer and then ended the call when the officer introduced themselves as an actual police officer. And the officers apparently talked to the scammers one more time. And when they talked to them, the scammers seemed shocked that Lolita had been shot and expressed some worry. But as far as I could find, police still have not arrested the person who was behind this. I'm not sure if they know who it was, especially since Uber banned the account. But as of this recording, the person behind the scam has not been arrested. Lolita was 61 at the time of her death and is described as a loving sister and mother who loved gardening, fishing, and cooking.
Yeah, this was another one that pissed me off because it was just so senseless. It was so senseless and stupid. Like critical thinking. Let's do some critical thinking. Why are we so quick to anger to shoot a stranger
Right.
who was trying to leave, who is trying to get away from you, and you don't allow her that? If you're so worried, if you're so concerned that you felt the need to shoot a woman, an unarmed woman at that, maybe if she asked you to leave, you should let her leave.
And my thing is, white people love to call the police for everything, but you don't call them until after she's already been shot multiple times. And I do want to say that I can definitely understand the fear, especially for an older person, the fear that comes with getting a call that, oh, this person that you love is in jail and there are people who are threatening them and you and your family. But like you said, Dev, when someone comes, and even if at first you believe that they're a part of this, when someone comes and they don't really know what's going on, they're trying to get away, you can't claim self-defense, which is what his lawyer is trying to do.
Of course they are. And they're going to go out of their way to try to paint this woman as some kind of threat to this man, which is going to piss me off because you already know I'm following this case too. And like you said, call the police for anything. Call the police for any and everything.
For someone selling lemonade.
Come on now. But you didn't call the police. You thought you had the authority to shoot somebody who was outside of your home, who in a way, and I know the prosecution is probably not going to charge this because they probably don't have enough evidence to do it, who in a way you held hostage and kidnapped. You didn't allow her to leave. You told her she was not free to go. Sounds like you held this woman hostage and then shot her.
Multiple times.
Right.
And it's just so sad because there are so many people who do Uber to make a little extra money, sometimes to get out of the house, many different reasons. No one who's doing Uber expects to lose their life. There are meant to be safeguards put in place, and there are safeguards put in place, but sometimes they can't even protect from situations like this. Because this reminds me a little bit of the other case where an Uber driver was shot by a woman who thought that he was kidnapping her because she saw Mexico on one of the interstate signs. They were in Texas.
Right.
It's like how when you're driving in Atlanta, the interstate sign might say Augusta, but you're nowhere near Augusta.
I'll do you one better. It might say South Carolina. It might say Tennessee. And this is why it needs to be harder for these fools to get guns. And I've said it on this podcast before, I am not anti-gun. I grew up in a very gun-centric household. Guns are more than welcome in my family. But the vast majority of you guys who have them don't need them, don't deserve them, aren't smart with them, don't use them for their actual intent, and you don't need to have one.
Exactly. And I think the other piece of this story is the racial element, is the fact that would she have been so threatening if she was an old white woman? If she were a 61-year-old white woman?
Of course not. He's not going to think of a white woman as threatening, but you know, us big, scary, loud, angry Black women are just so scary.
Exactly. And I think the other part that's hard is that that footage went viral. And I can only imagine how hard it is for Lolita's family and loved ones to have been exposed to that, have been exposed to her last moments like that. That's not the way you want to remember someone. And the last thing I'll say is we not letting these scammers off the hook either, because y'all are just as culpable for this. I really think that you have to be a certain kind of depraved to scam elderly people and poor people. If you want to scam rich people and be like Anna Delvini, whatever her name is, listen, no thoughts. But people who scam people who actually don't have a lot of money, who have a lot to lose, people who take advantage of the fact that many older people are not as familiar with technology and how it can be used to do nefarious things. People who do that, what is wrong with y'all? I really feel like it's not just the money that they get out of it. They also get some sort of ego boost from it.
I completely agree with you because I feel like the only way that you'd be comfortable doing that is if you are a sick and twisted individual. Oh, absolutely. I need them to hurry up and figure out who these scammers are, and I need them to see the inside of a jail cell swiftly.
Yeah, because a woman is dead because of you. What do you think is going to happen when you tell someone that you're going to harm their relatives if they don't give you money? You think they're just going to be like, oh, well, I guess I got to give the money. I'm not suffering emotionally or whatever. Like, people seriously don't think. They lack empathy. They lack common sense. I'm really trying to think of what they do have.
Audacity.
True. And that's it.
Every time, sis. Every time. But yeah, that is heinous. It's just heinous. Going back to something I've said before, they set her up. She wouldn't be dead if y'all didn't send her to that house. You set this whole thing in motion. And obviously, he made a choice. He made a choice to shoot a woman who tried to leave, but y'all sent her to his house.
As we wrap up today's discussion, we're going to move into our segment called Today in Crime, where we discuss a crime or a crime-related event that took place on this day. On December 6, 1969, murder at the Altamont Festival brings the 1960s to a violent end. The Altamont Festival was a new music festival in Northern California. It was the brainchild of the Rolling Stones, who would hope to cap off their U.S. tour in late 1969 with a concert that would be the West Coast equivalent of Woodstock in both scale and spirit. Unlike Woodstock, however, which was the result of months of careful planning by a team of well-funded organizers, the Altamont Festival was a largely improvised affair that didn't even have a definite venue arranged just days before the event. It was only 2 days before the event, on December 4th, 1969, that organizers settled on the Altamont Speedway location for a free concert that was, at that point, scheduled to include Santana, the Jefferson Airplane, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and the Grateful Dead. I only know 2 of those, all in support of the headlining Stones. The event would also include, infamously, several dozen members of the Hells Angel motorcycle gang acting as informal security staff in exchange for $500 worth of beer as a quote-unquote gratuity. By the time the concert's next to last act, the Grateful Dead, was scheduled to appear, it was already dark. But the Grateful Dead had actually left the venue out of concern for their safety when they learned that a singer for the Jefferson Airplane had been knocked unconscious by one of the Hells Angels in a melee during his band's performance. It was during the Rolling Stones set, however, that a 21-year-old Hells Angel named Alan Pissarro stabbed a gun-wielding 18-year-old named Meredith Hunter just 20 feet in front of the stage where Mick Jagger was performing Under My Thumb. Unaware that someone had died, the Rolling Stones completed their set without further incident, bringing an end to this tumultuous day that also saw 3 accidental deaths and 4 live births.
What?
I read that at the same time I said it.
What?
4?
Why are you there?
Meredith Hunter's death at Altamont was actually captured on film as part of a documentary of the Stones' 1969 tour, which opens with Mick Jagger viewing the footage in an editing room several months later. In the years since, Mick Jagger has not spoken publicly about the killing, for which Alan Pissarro was tried but acquitted on grounds of self-defense. And that is what happened on this day, December 6th. If you found this story interesting, leave a guitar emoji in the comments.
Girl, this was way more wild than I anticipated it was going to be.
I'm still stuck on the 4 live births.
It's the 4 live births plus the Hells Angel plus the 3 accidental deaths. So they were independent of the Hells Angels. Because as soon as you said that, that was the first thing that popped into my head. I was like, oh, dang, the Hells Angels are out there raising hell. And only one did. So what happened to the 3 other people?
It being a big environment like this, I wouldn't be surprised if there were people falling, alcohol poisoning, many different things that could have happened. But also for one of the Hells Angels to have punched one of the people performing.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Also, for y'all to not have solidified a venue until 2 days before the event. And this is 1969. It's not like you can make a post on your Instagram story and tell people where the location's going to be. Like, what was going on?
Yeah, I would love to know the thought process behind that. I feel really bad for Mick Jagger, especially if he didn't know it happened and then saw it all those months later. That's still incredibly sad. And you have footage of this person's last moments. And as we were just talking about, that's devastating. Also, so when they say live births, why are you there? If you're close enough to be giving birth, I don't know. And obviously, I've never been pregnant. I don't know what it's like to carry a child. But I have been told that when you are close to delivery of a child, you barely want to exist. You want to sit on the couch and do nothing. Hold your stomach up to relieve some of the pain on your lower back. That's my understanding. And you go to a Rolling Stones concert? What?
And I actually wouldn't be surprised if any of those were stress induced. Like maybe they weren't at 40 weeks. They were a few weeks early, but they gave birth due to all of the stress that was around them. Because the Rolling Stones were, of course, a very popular band back then. There's a whole bunch of people. You got the Hells Angels doing security for $500 worth of beer. I just can't imagine that it was a peaceful environment at any point of this show.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Also, who's your contact at the Hells Angels? How did the Hells Angels end up holding down security? I want to know how that happened. Who's Mima? Who's Mima? Knows the leader of the Hells Angels. That's what I want to know.
What a story.
Yeah. One hell of a story for sure. Any other thoughts, friend?
Nope. That's all I've got.
Thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode. We covered a lot of cases today, and there are way too many to name and thank. But we would like to give a special thank you to our listeners who've supported and listened to us all through this year and last. If you'd like to check out photos related to these cases, please be sure to follow us at Criminalish Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Listeners, if you like what you hear, be sure to tell a friend and leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to the Criminalish Podcast. And if you are listening on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel and feel free to leave any comments or questions. As always, stay nosy, my friends. Bye.
Bye.